"No one marries a fat girl, sir," she said on a blind date. The CEO millionaire smiled. "Let's prove them all wrong." The cafe was tucked on the corner of a leafy street in Portland, where vines curled around the windows like lazy cats and the smell of roasted beans floated through the cracked wooden door. Inside, the space was dim and golden, lit by mismatched lamps and the late morning sun catching dust in its beams. Wooden chairs scraped against worn floors, and vintage records played just loud enough to be interesting. Lena Bergstrom pushed the door open, stepped in, and immediately regretted arriving early. She was 26, with pale blonde curls loosely tied into a half-up bun and soft features that some described as classic, and others, less kindly, ignored altogether. Her body was full, visibly round beneath her vintage blue dress, the kind with buttons that always tugged a little when she sat. She adjusted her oversized cardigan, more out of habit than modesty, and scanned the cafe full. Of course, Saturdays in Portland were made for places like this. She found a table near the back, dropped her canvas tote onto it, and exhaled. Her fingers fidgeted with the sugar packets on the table while she checked her phone again. No new messages, no updates from the dating app, no sign of the man her best friend had dared her to meet. Her heart was a blend of dread and something more dangerous. Hope. She sat down. A split second of silence. Then the left leg of the chair gave out with a crack and Lena toppled sideways in an inelegant blur of curls, fabric, and pure disbelief. The cafe froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. A spoon clattered. Someone let out a small gasp. Lena, mortified, stared at the ceiling for half a second, then laughed loudly. Too loudly. "Guess I skipped leg day," she said to no one in particular, hoisting herself up with as much grace as a person could summon after such a spectacle. Her face flushed red as she set the broken chair upright and tried to pretend she had not just crashed into a public floor. That was when she heard footsteps behind her. "Is this seat taken?" a calm male voice asked. Lena turned. The man standing beside her was tall, but not in a way that imposed. He wore a slate-gray sweater and dark jeans, and his dark hair was slightly wind-blown. There was a relaxed stillness in his posture, like someone who had decided long ago not to panic about things he could not control. "That's the chair's fault," he said, pulling out the chair beside her. "But if it helps, I've broken 2 umbrellas and a drone this week." She blinked. He smiled. She smirked, then sighed. "You must be Elias." He nodded, and before he could offer anything else, she said it fast, automatic, like pulling a ripcord. "Don't worry, you don't have to comfort me. I know how it will end. No one will marry a fat girl, sir." The words hung in the air like a slow-moving bruise. Elias did not flinch. He didn't look away. He simply tilted his head slightly, then said with a half-smile, "Then let's prove them all wrong. Starting with another chair." Without ceremony, he stood, scanned the cafe, and returned a moment later with a sturdier chair, one that did not creak or wobble. He placed it gently behind her and waited. Lena sat down again, slower this time. The new chair held. Elias pulled out his own chair and joined her as if they had both simply arrived at the same table at the same time, as if nothing had just happened. As if she had not just hit the floor or bared a raw truth like a wound wrapped in humor. And for the first time that morning, Lena exhaled without bracing for impact. Around them, the cafe hummed back to life. Conversations resumed. Lattes hissed into mugs, and nobody looked twice anymore. But Lena noticed something shift, not just in the chair beneath her, but in the air between them. Elias's reaction had not erased the moment. It had held it carefully, then offered a place to sit with it. And maybe, she thought, that was the beginning of something worth staying for. The new chair held steady under Lena as she shifted her weight slightly, testing it like a weary animal. Elias sat across from her, relaxed, forearms resting on the table, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth like it had all the time in the world. She glanced around the cafe. No one was looking anymore. The storm had passed. "Thanks for the rescue," she said. "And for the chair diplomacy." "You're welcome," he said, then paused. Though technically the chair was the real traitor. She laughed genuinely this time. Her fingers curled around the menu, mostly as something to do with her hands. She peeked over the edge of it. "So smart homes, huh? That's your thing?" Elias nodded. "I build houses that know when you're cold, lock themselves at night, and talk to your coffee maker in the morning." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like dating, except the house actually listens." "Exactly," he said. "Which is probably why I'm better with houses than people." There was a quiet beat. Lena watched him over the top of her coffee cup, then asked more softly, "Then why do this? Why sign up for a blind date?" "My sister signed me up," he admitted. "She said, I've been talking to thermostats more than humans lately." Lena laughed again, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Relatable. My best friend says if I do not get out there, she'll take away my Wi-Fi." She sipped her drink, some lavender honey latte that tasted like hope dressed in caffeine, and set the cup back down. "I do not usually talk like that," she said quietly. "What I said earlier about Elias gave a small nod, pushing "it's just," she began, then let out a breath. "In college I was in this improv group. They always cast me as the funny one, the friend, the weird aunt, never the love interest. It became this running joke, you're the fat girl, so be loud, be wild, distract from the fact that you'll never be the one anyone picks." He did not say anything at first, just listened. "And I had this crush," she continued. "A guy in the film program. I found out he used me in a short film project as the comic relief. Called me charming plus-size energy. I laughed when I found out. Then I cried. Then I turned it into a joke because it's easier that way." Elias did not interrupt. He did not rush to reassure her or deny her pain or say the usual things. "You're beautiful the way you are," or his loss, or any of the other hallmark fluff people throw at your bruises when they do not want to see them. Instead, he reached for his coffee cup. He held it between both hands, tilted it slightly, and let it rest gently back onto the wooden table. The base wobbled just enough to send a ripple through the surface of the liquid. "Sometimes the cup isn't cracked," he said softly. "It's just sitting on a wobbly table." Lena looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like someone had not tried to fix her, but instead offered to fix the surface beneath her. Her voice came out quiet. "That's oddly comforting." Elias smiled. Not smug, not pitying, just kind. "We blame the cup a lot, but the table matters, too." She nodded. Her throat felt tight, and not because of nerves. It was the kind of tightness that comes when someone hands you a thought you did not know you needed. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the street buzzed with the usual Saturday sounds, dogs barking, bikes rushing past, laughter from somewhere far off. Inside, the cafe had gone back to its rhythms, but something had shifted in her chest. She glanced at Elias again. His focus was not on her body or her history or any of the things people usually saw first. He was just there holding space. And maybe that was the rarest kind of attention. And in that rare quiet between strangers, Lena felt something unfamiliar flicker awake. Possibility. The second date was Elias's idea, though he had let Lena pick the time. She chose a lazy Sunday morning when the world moved a little slower. He chose the place, a tiny used bookstore tucked behind a row of overflowing flower pots in a narrow alley off Division Street. Lena arrived a few minutes early. The sun caught in her hair, now curled deliberately instead of out of obligation, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of light that came from feeling seen. She wore a soft cardigan over jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Reading is a form of rebellion." Her tote bag had books, actual books. She came prepared. Elias greeted her with a nod and something in his hands. "I brought you something," he said. "Do not panic." It is not a gift, just a loan. It was an old paperback. The spine had clearly been loved too much. A faded red sticker on the cover read, "Poems for the ones who never quite aligned." Inside, he had marked a poem titled, "In Praise of Things That Don't Fit in Drawers." She laughed quietly. "Is this a compliment?" "It is a protest," he said, "against all the drawers that ever made you feel like you were too much." Lena traced her thumb along the edge of the page. "You know you are weird, right?" "Frequently," Elias said. "It keeps me employed." They wandered the aisles together, fingers brushing over old bindings and paper smells. She pulled out a mystery novel with a cover so tacky it made them both laugh. He held up a book about chair design with mock seriousness. She pointed out a shelf labeled romance and whispered, "My natural habitat." Afterward, they slipped into a tea shop 2 doors down, a narrow place that smelled like citrus peel and wood smoke. They settled into a booth by the window. The table had uneven legs again, but Lena did not mind this time. She took the unevenness as part of the charm. "Somewhere between the second steep of jasmine tea and a stolen bite of Elias's ginger scone," Lena said. "You know, there's this dress." Elias looked up, curious. She was twisting her bracelet around her wrist, which he had learned meant she was trying to talk about something that made her heart thump funny. "I bought it 3 years ago," she said. "It is this burgundy velvet wrap dress. Gorgeous, but I have never worn it, still has the tag. I told myself it was a gold dress, for when I lost weight, or found confidence, or shrank into the version of me that was allowed to wear velvet." Elias tilted his head. "Considering who decided velvet was conditional," she blinked. "What? That you had to be a certain shape to wear a texture?" She let out a half laugh, half sigh. "I guess I did. Or magazines. Or whoever makes up these silent rules about who gets to feel beautiful. Maybe." Elias said those rules were made by people trying to sell shame as motivation. She looked at him for a long moment, not smiling, not crying, just breathing something in that had long been missing. "You never say I'm pretty," she said quietly. "I do not think that would help," Elias said just as softly. "I think it might sound like I was trying to balance a scale that never needed to be built in the first place." She did not know what to say to that, so she just sat with it, letting his words settle into all the places her old thoughts used to live. They finished their tea and decided to walk a bit. Outside, the air was crisp and playful. Leaves crunched under their shoes as they ambled down a nearby path lined with maple trees. Then it happened, quick and startling. A woman in her 70s slipped on a patch of wet sidewalk ahead of them. Elias was already moving before Lena could react. He reached her gently, crouched beside her, and asked if she was okay. When the woman nodded, shaken but unhurt, he took off his jacket and folded it into a pad for her to sit on while she caught her breath. It was just who he was. Lena stood a few steps back, watching, and something shifted. Not in him, in her. She realized she had spent most of her life looking for people who would tolerate her. But Elias did not tolerate her. He existed beside her without flinching. He made room. For the first time, she wondered if maybe she had been measuring worth with the wrong units all along. As they helped the woman to a nearby bench and waited for her granddaughter to arrive, Elias glanced at Lena. "You okay?" She nodded. But inside, she was not the same. Something had cracked, but not in a bad way. Something was leaking out. Something like belief. The invitation came in the form of a text. "Elias, we're testing a new prototype this afternoon. Want to see what I actually do all day?" Lena hesitated before typing sure with a nervous emoji. It had been 2 weeks since their second date, and in that time, Elias had become both familiar and mysterious. She still did not know what made him tick, but something told her he was the kind of man who did not ask questions just to be polite. If he invited her into his world, he meant it. She arrived at the office building tucked in the quieter part of the city, Portland Industrial on the outside, but warm and alive on the inside. Through the glass doors, she saw exposed brick walls, soft yellow pendant lights, and planters bursting with real greenery. It looked less like a tech company and more like a renovated greenhouse that had learned to code. "Welcome to the chaos," Elias said, meeting her by the front desk. He led her through the open workspace where people lounged on bean bags or tinkered at standing desks. There was a studio for product photography, a shelf-lined reading corner with mismatched armchairs, and even a little corner with a pottery wheel. Clay splattered, unbothered. "Why the wheel?" she asked, nodding toward it. "When the mind gets stuck," he said. "The hands still know how to move." They walked down a hallway lined with framed concept sketches, chairs, lights, adaptive furniture. "We design things that don't exclude people," Elias explained. "That's the goal." Lena nodded, unsure how to respond. The space felt generous, not just aesthetically, but emotionally. It breathed with the assumption that everyone belonged. He brought her into a room with a wide testing table surrounded by several different chair prototypes. One looked like a modernist sculpture with flexible joints and a pressure-sensing base. "Here it is," Elias said. "Our latest." "What is it?" "A chair that adapts its center of gravity to whoever sits in it. Doesn't matter your size, posture, or if you shift. It redistributes weight so the legs never buckle. And it tells you if one's loose before it ever breaks." Lena blinked. "So, a smart chair." Elias tilted his head. "A fair chair." She laughed. "That's your branding. I am workshopping it." He gestured for her to try it. She stared at the chair, unsure. A part of her wanted to say, "Yes." Another part screamed, "Do not test fate in front of the hot CEO. You are maybe kind of sort of dating." He must have seen the hesitation. Without a word, Elias sat in it first. The chair adjusted with a soft, stable, and seamless. He stood up again. "Safe," he said simply. She rolled her eyes but smiled, stepping forward. As she sat, the chair gently shifted. No cacks, no dips. It simply held her. No apology required. She exhaled and realized she had been holding her breath. "It is just a chair," Elias said quietly. "But it is also not." He did not need to explain. She understood. A young woman passed by, a tablet tucked under one arm. She slowed near Lena and leaned in. Voice hushed with curiosity. "Is he showing you around?" Lena nodded, surprised. The woman gave a half-smile like she was trying not to seem too impressed. "He does not usually bring people here. You must be special." She walked away before Lena could say anything. Lena sat back in the chair, her heart doing a strange little jump. Not because of the word special, but because she realized for the first time in a long time she believed she might be. Not beautiful because someone said so. Not valuable because she proved it, but chosen. The kind of chosen that did not require shrinking. Elias handed her a mug of mint tea someone had brought in. "You okay?" Lena looked around again. Everything about this place had been designed with thought, for comfort, for honesty, for real people, not models, not efficiency machines. People who wanted to breathe and stretch and create and not break things when they sat down. "I am okay," she said. "Your company is weird," he grinned. "It is mine. I get to make the rules." She sipped the tea, warm and minty. In the back of her mind, something shifted again. Not dramatically, just a soft realignment, a gentle suggestion. Maybe the problem was never you not fitting the world. Maybe the world was just badly designed. The venue shimmered with glass and chrome, all clean lines and ambient lighting. A soft jazz quartet played somewhere in the corner, half drowned out by the hum of professional networking and polite laughter. Lena stood near the entrance, smoothing the skirt of her navy satin dress. It clung in the right places, but not too tightly, hugging the soft curve of her waist with surprising grace. She had bought it 3 years ago, but never worn it, always waiting for the right occasion, or maybe the right version of herself. "Too much?" she had asked Elias over the phone. "You could show up in a cardboard box and outshine the LED walls," he had replied casually. It did not help. But now, standing at the center of an event she barely understood, she realized he had not said it to make her feel pretty. He had said it because to him it was obvious. He appeared by her side, dressed in an unstructured charcoal blazer and black tee. No tie, no fuss, just Elias. "You made it," he said, not hiding his smile. "You invited me," she replied, half joking, half panicking. "I know, still you made it." The way he looked at her, without scanning, without comparing, just being, steadied her. But her eyes still flicked around the room. There were other women in sleek black, in red lipstick, in glass stilettos. Most of them seemed to know the terrain, knew who to talk to, how to stand, how to laugh in shortathand. She kept her hands on her clutch like it was armor. As the event picked up, Elias guided her gently through introductions, found her a plate of mini kitches, whispered dry commentary in her ear about jargon-filled speeches. Whenever he stepped away to shake hands, he returned to her side within minutes. Still, the eyes were there. Lena noticed a woman, early 40s, stunning in that CEO at yoga retreat way, eyeing her as they passed. Not hostile, not overt, just observing, measuring. The woman leaned slightly toward Elias, her tone silky. "Is she your girlfriend?" Elias did not flinch. He smiled. Not wide, not smug, just a gentle crescent of truth. "She's Lena." The woman blinked, half expecting more. When nothing came, she gave a tight smile and moved on. Lena stared at Elias, a question in her eyes. "What?" he asked. "Just Lena?" she echoed. "Lena is enough?" he said, then reached out, his fingers brushing her shoulder as he adjusted the dress strap that had started to slip. The movement was small, thoughtless, as if he had always done it. Her heart thudded so loud she thought someone else might hear. Later, they stood on the rooftop terrace for air. The city lights spread below them like melted stars. Lena leaned on the rail, wine glass untouched in her hand. "So," she said, careful with the words, "why didn't you just say yes?" Elias looked at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Because I am not trying to hide something that feels right." That was it. No speech, no declaration, just the steady weight of someone who had no interest in explaining away what made him feel whole. Lena looked back out at the skyline. She had been bracing herself for a fall all evening, but the fall never came. No punchline, no judgment, just Elias. Solid, close, quiet. And maybe that was the thing that was breaking her open in the best way. He did not push her forward. He simply stayed beside her long enough that she started to move on her own. The voice came from the other room, muffled but unmistakable. "She's nice, but you know how people will talk." Lena had not meant to overhear. She had been in Elias's kitchen pouring herself a glass of water while he stepped out to take a call. The door to his home office was cracked. His mother's voice drifted through like the chill before a storm. She froze mid-pour, the water sloshing gently against the lip of the glass. His reply was inaudible, but it did not matter. Her chest had already tightened, breath catching in that old familiar way. Lena stepped back from the door, careful not to make a sound. Her fingers curled around the glass, but it felt too heavy now. Or maybe her hands felt too small. She left shortly after, smiling just enough to make the goodbye seem normal. Over the next week, she began to vanish in fragments. A cancelled coffee date, a rescheduled dinner, then silence wrapped in work excuses and soft apologies. Elias did not chase her. He did not demand explanations or bombard her with what's wrong texts. Instead, he sent her a single message. I'll be here fixing chairs if you ever need one. No guilt, no pressure, just a quiet offer to remain somewhere close with a chair that would hold her if she ever chose to sit. That night, Lena stood in front of her mirror. She wore the same navy satin dress from the tech event, the one she had once feared would betray her softness in a room full of angles. This time, she did not tug at the waist. She did not check the lighting or suck in her breath. She simply looked. The girl in the mirror was not trembling. Her arms hung loose at her sides. Her eyes were glassy, yes, but not from fear, she whispered. You are not too much. It felt like something cracked. Not her. Just the shell of herself that had grown too tight. Tears came soft and silent like steam lifting from a cup. Not from sadness, but from release. It was never Elias's mother or the eyes in the crowd or the boys in college who joked behind her back. Not any more. The only voice still holding her hostage had been her own. And maybe it was time to stop listening. She peeled the dress off and hung it back in the closet. Not out of rejection, but as a promise she would wear it again soon. But not tonight. Tonight she needed to sit alone and stay. Not to escape, not to disappear, but to remain in the room of her own life. That small, quiet act, staying, felt like a revolution. It was just past 7 when Elias opened his front door and found Lena standing there, rain-damp hair curling more wildly than usual, eyes unsure but steady. In her hands, awkwardly wrapped in brown paper and a bit of twine, was a chair, not full-sized, not perfect, just big enough for one person and clearly handmade. "I brought you something," she said, breath clouding in the evening air. He stepped aside without a word, letting her in. Once inside, she placed the chair down gently on his hardwood floor. The legs were slightly uneven, one sloped subtly inward. The backrest was a bit crooked, but it stood. "I am not sure it will hold," she admitted, brushing sawdust from her jacket. "But I made it for someone I trust." Elias looked at the chair, then at her. He didn't ask why she had made it or how long it had taken, or whether she had doubted herself during every moment of building it. He simply walked to it, turned, and sat. The chair creaked, but it held. They both laughed, full-bodied, breathless, relieved. Lena reached up to wipe a stray tear, surprised to find it there. When the laughter faded, Elias leaned back, fingers resting lightly on the chair's armrest. "My mother," he said slowly, "has invited you to dinner." Lena blinked. "After?" He nodded. "After?" "Because I told her something." She tilted her head. "What?" Elias looked at her. Not down, not away, not with pity or promise, just with presence. "I told her, you do not need anyone's approval. You do not need to fit. But I want to be with someone who no longer needs to protect herself just to be loved." Lena's breath caught. She had thought she came tonight to give something, to offer her own awkward symbol of courage. But here he was, meeting her right there, exactly as she was, not saving her, just standing with her. That mattered more. She walked to the chair and sat beside him on the floor, her hand resting on his knee. No grand declarations, no dramatic speeches, just the warmth of wood, the creak of old floorboards, and the shared silence of two people who had chosen not to run. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because they no longer had to be. The backyard was wrapped in golden sunlight, filtered through string lights and blooming jasmine. Wooden tables were scattered across the grass, covered in white linen, and wild flowers in mismatched vases. It smelled like warm sugar and honeysuckle. The wedding was small, just family, close friends, and one dog that kept trying to eat the flower petals. Clara, Elias's niece, skipped down the aisle in a pink tulle dress, tossing handfuls of rose petals as if they were confetti. Her hair was done up in little braids, but one had already come undone. No one minded, least of all Lena, who watched her with a hand over her heart. Lena wore a dress she had once sworn she would never wear, fitted soft ivory, and made of silk that moved like water when she walked. Her blonde curls were pinned loosely, a few strands brushing her cheek as she smiled. At the end of the aisle stood Elias, looking at her like the world had stopped just long enough to let him breathe. The ceremony was quiet. There were no sweeping orchestras or long sermons, just a few promises spoken slowly, like truths that had already been lived before they were ever spoken aloud. When it came time for Elias's speech, he held Lena's hands and looked out at the guests. Then back at her. The best things in life, he began, voice steady, do not always fit right the first time. Some of them are awkward, uneven, maybe even broken at the start. But then they grow. They stretch. They settle. And when they find their space, nothing else could possibly take their place. He paused, eyes soft. Lena did not fit into my world. She made me build a better one. There was a quiet ripple through the crowd, the kind of silence that holds reverence. Then applause, soft at first, then full. Later, after cake had been eaten, a two-tiered confection shaped like a wooden chair, and the fairy lights began to blink lazily in the dusk. Lena returned to her studio. She sat in the chair. The one from the cafe, the one that had once given way beneath her, repaired now, solid, refinished with care. She traced her hand along the armrest, feeling the grain of the wood. There were still imperfections. She liked it that way. Elias stepped in behind her, still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled. He held a small ceramic mug, steam curling from it. He handed it to her without a word. She looked down. The mug was hand-thrown, slightly lopsided, perfectly hers. Etched into the clay were the words, "No one marries a fat girl. Watch me." Lena laughed, the sound low and full. Then she sipped her tea, leaned back in the chair, and reached out her free hand for his. They sat like that, quiet, whole, and finally unafraid. If this story made your heart ache in the best way, if it reminded you that love isn't about fitting in, but being seen, then don't let it end here. Hit that hype button to show your support, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales that celebrate imperfection, kindness, and the quiet bravery it takes to be fully yourself. We craft every story like that handmade chair meant to hold the weight of what matters. Stay tuned. Stay tender. Stay stirring.